My name is Michael Guyette, publisher of the Lead Lag Report. Joining me for the hour is Mr. Brian Lee. Brian, introduce yourself to the audience and to me. Who are you? What's your background? What have you done throughout your career? And what are you doing currently?
Yeah, my name is Brian Lee. So, like Michael said, I used to be a professional gamer. I competed in a game called Defense of the Ancients. It's a computer game. I did that for over a decade, was ranked 1, represented the United States internationally, and was ranked 7th in the world around 2013, 2014. So that was the beginning of my career. Eventually was forced to retire from just taking a hand injury from just playing way too much, and converted some of my savings into a trading account. And so basically took the skills that I learned in professional gaming and brought them over to the trading world. Eventually was able to find my footing, and I've been doing that for the past 7-8 years now. So happy to speak with you and answer any questions you have about that.
So I know that obviously there's a lot of money as far as these big competitions when it comes to esports. Some people that are maybe older look at that and say, I can't believe that people make money off it. But I've actually seen some pretty incredible dynamics when it comes to esports and the kind of money that can be made. I am curious, when you talk about the number of hours that you spent playing and training in that sense, how much of your day, of your weeks, of your months were dedicated?
It's a 24/7 thing. If you're not sleeping, even you're eating or taking a shower, you're thinking about the games. I was responsible for leading the team, so I had an additional layer of responsibility for strategy. And so this is something that I pretty much put at least 12 to 16 hours a day in.
And is it similar to other domains in that, the incremental amount of extra skill you get gets less and less? There's a law of diminishing returns to every hour that you put into it?
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely want to put in, I don't know if I believe in this necessarily, but you want to put in your 10,000 hours minimum. And then eventually it becomes way more strategy than, let's say, reaction speed. And just going back to the prize pools, just to let you guys know how competitive the game was. In 2012, 2013, I was competing for about $1 million to $3 million. And in 2021, the most recent prize pool for what is considered the Super Bowl of esports, called the International, the prize pool was $40 million. So this is like a very big deal.
Okay, so you did that, you had the injury, then you say to yourself, well, I want to do something else. I think the difference between gaming and markets is one has less of a luck component, whereas the other has more luck. And I think when you correct me wrong with this, when you think about gaming, there are rules, there's algorithms, you can strategize, there's a clearer link between your strategy, winning the game, and your effort. In trading, that's not necessarily the case, right? Because it's hard to really know how much of your profit is from your skill versus just randomness or outright luck. If you believe in that the way that I do, how did you think through being successful in that domain on the esports side to being successful as a trader?
You're correct. Normally that is the case for me. I'm a pretty systematic guy. So when I put pen to paper, my ideas, I definitely want to back test it out and make sure that while I'm inside the market, I'm going to be just pressing the buttons, like kind of the monkey pushing the buttons rather than making the intuitive decisions at the moment. While there is some discretion with my process, more or less, the way I value myself is in two fronts. So of course, there's a lot of variance in trading. There's definitely a lot of variance in gaming as well. So I'm definitely not a stranger to this, but in terms of variance, like obviously you're not going to win every time. There is a probability component to it. But as long as you understand the foundational aspect of risk reward and win rate, then you can understand, hey, I can be profitable with a less than stellar win rate. So personally, I have about 30 to 40% win rate on a good month. And because my average winner is about 3 to 6 times my loser, then that math helps me understand like, hey, it's not about winning every single time. It's just about playing as many hands as you can with edge. And for me, that's where I found my place with variance. And then the second thing is because I am systematic, I view this more of like a performance sport. So in a similar way to gaming or just any other sports in general, like golf or whatever, what you have you. Basically, I'm looking at this like once I'm in the market and I already have my plans, my strategies laid out, how closely can I get to my black and white signals? How closely can I get to where I intend to enter on paper? And same things for the exit and with my risk. These factors, including position sizing and having really top-notch risk management, I believe that I'm taking control of whatever that I can. in an environment that's completely random. So that is, in essence, what I'm doing.
Arguably, there are certain parts of the marketplace where you're more likely to have an edge than others, right? So it's one of the arguments for a long time has been that you really can't get an edge from trading large cap stocks if you believe in market efficiency. Smaller cap, micro cap stocks, there's more edge because there's less analyst coverage, so there might be more inefficiencies there. Talk about where you tend to trade, because I think that's a big part that's often missed is where is the edge sharpest?
Sure, yes. I grew up trading small caps. I'm still trading small caps as we speak. To the short side, I understand that you're not a big fan of it, but essentially we have these stocks that typically are, 20, 40, 50, 100%, pretty much several times a week, if not dozens of times. And that automatically puts these stocks in a criteria, or they put them in the mean reversion umbrella, is what I like to call it. Basically, stocks that are getting extended on either news, PRs, etc. And the edge within this niche is essentially that these companies, number one, can't be traded by large institutional owners because they have limited liquidity. Number two, oftentimes are introducing supply in order to keep the lights on. And they have to disclose any material changes with their supply dilution share structure through the SEC. And if you understand how to read filings, then you have the ability to basically have some sort of thesis or some sort of agenda when you go into each trade. And with that, you can basically let price action verify your thesis. So even though you have all those components stacked in your favor, you still have to basically understand it's still a probability. So between that, that's just a very low level kind of process there, but that should give you a good idea of what I'm trading.
Okay. And when you say on the smaller cap side, are we talking more, smaller or micro cap or kind of on the upper end of that range?
I would say the micro, it's anything between, for me, is about like 50 cents to $15 or $20. Occasionally they'll rip up and go into the $50, $100 space. And also occasionally stocks that are mid or large cap will exhibit behaviors similar to small cap stocks, like AMC or GameStop, the ones that just went absolutely crazy. But in a sense, like they are the lower market cap stocks. I'm not going to trade like OTC, for example, but anything listed on NASDAQ is totally cool. And within this price parameter.
Is it fair to say that there's less algorithmic manipulation is not the right word, but just less interference by algos that are just automatically buying or selling when you're talking about smaller, less liquid names that makes their price action more based on human triggers? I'm trying to get to the question of the reaction time of that pricing. Is it automated like we're seeing with a lot of these large cap names or not so much?
I definitely think there is an algorithmic presence. Definitely a lot of market making going on and taking the other side of the crowd. But the thing is, in terms of large caps, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this is my best guess that you want to ride the momentum or the wave of the larger players, right? In the small cap space, the same thing, but just to the opposite side. So the larger players typically are on the sell side. So if you can basically get on the short side and ride the momentum like of the selling pressure that they're constantly introducing into these low quality stocks in order to keep them afloat through dilution, then you have an overwhelming force towards the downside, especially considering the fact that they're up 50, 100, 200% on a regular basis without any proper kind of material news of any sort. So like even with the presence of algorithms or things like that, unless the trade absolutely has no like larger force pushing them down, then it's not really going to make that big of a difference, to be honest.
Okay, so now this has been an interesting year to think about shorting smaller cap type names because it's been a very bifurcated market, right? Small caps, other than the last 48 hours, really haven't done all that much, and they're still largely in a kind of sideways trading range. Talk about environments where that approach of shorting kind of really the smaller cap names have popped in a very aggressive way. Environments where that tends to be more favorable for your approach versus not. What tends to be a tailwind for that way of thinking about trading?
Well, to be honest, despite let's say any of the larger ETFs around small caps being inactive or even just biotechs being down for the year, et cetera. Small caps still, for the most part, are a daily consistent occurrence because there are constantly stocks that you stay gapping up and putting in like pretty good range and pretty good volume. So as far as like growing a small account, you have the benefit of having this large frequency of setups. I would say the only times it really, and this is probably why you're noticing that, the only times it really gets quite slow is during the earnings seasons when a lot of the bigger names take a lot of the stage, as well as in 2022 when the interest rates started going up and the war in Ukraine started to happen, a lot of uncertainty overall. So less money in the market. That was another like kind of stale period. But ever since I've been doing this, those are the only two times where things really get extremely slow. So if you're just basically looking for single stocks that are gapping up and putting in pretty good ranges, then you're more than likely going to have at least one or two setups per day. So this is the benefit of trading these.
But there's always, of course, the issue of availability to short, right? So you might have the setups being frequent, but maybe there's just no ability to actually short them.
That's true, but there are a lot of specialty brokers these days. Like before, it used to be much more difficult, but these days it's extremely competitive. If you really wanted to do this, you'd be able to find it pretty easily. The availability is there. I have basically can trade about 99% of what I see. So it's not been a problem at all.
Okay. Now, when you're identifying a setup, something that has gone up, are you trying to factor in, is there a reason for it to have gone up as much as it does? Does sort of the reasoning factor into whether you want to actually take the trade or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So I put it into a pretty basic formula. And basically what it is I call it 4 pillars. So we're going to analyze it on the first pillar, which is the technical side. So we're just looking purely at the charts, the intraday, the daily. We're trying to see the macro kind of trend, right? And then on the fundamental side, so that's looking at the actual statistics behind the company, understanding if it's a good company, not backed by legit investors, et cetera. Looking at the filings, trying to figure out whether or not the company has any supply or if they're cash rich. That makes a very big difference in these situations. The third would be news. So understanding like, is this a material news? Is this something that fundamentally changes this stock and maybe prices it a bit higher? Or is it something that's recycled, something that is meant to gain hype and something that is most likely paid out and written just to attract more investors in that moment? And then the fourth one for me would be cycle. So these small cap stocks are extremely cyclical. They bounce between extremely bullish and extremely bearish, fairly rarely in between a neutral state. And so by knowing essentially which side is happening to make the most money, you start to gauge the emotions of the traders involved. And that way you can anticipate, let's say, if short sellers are extremely aggressive, they're constantly winning, then you would expect a really extreme, exaggerated squeeze of some sort. And that kind of emboldens bulls to go long and be aggressive and try to compound the risk. And eventually they get caught because of the nature of small caps. Probably primarily, I would say 70, 80% of them are going to be biased inherently to short side. So when the gravity comes back in and the emotions and the bubbles start bursting, then that's where we flip to the other side. But this is consistently happening here, like month after month, over and over again.
How long do you keep a trade on? Is it, if you're trying to fade these pops, right, by shorting them, presumably you also have to be pretty quick in terms of covering.
Typically, I close out by the end of the day. Occasionally, we'll bring it over 1 or 2 more days, but it's my average trade time is a couple hours. So it's not particularly scalping, but I would call it more like position trading intraday.
Do you look at the option side at all when it comes to doing some decisions like that intraday?
I don't. These companies often don't have any option chains.
Yeah, the depth's not going to be there, right? Sure.
Yeah.
But do you look at it, just say in general, I do think, and there's a lot of interesting studies around how zero DTE seems to have caused different ways that the market opens and closes compared to all this kind of manic volume on the option side.
Right. As far as I'm aware, it's not making any impact right now. But if it did, then I would learn. Yeah. As far as zero DTE, that's interesting. Mostly on the equity side.
All right. Let's talk about risk management. The reason I'm very anti shorting, at least from a more than a single day perspective, is, as you know, right, the risk of loss is unlimited, right? Because something keeps on going up, but your most you can make is zero. And I think most people think about shorting and think of it in terms of an outright directional bet on the markets. So if you're bearish, that means you have to short. Now let's go back to shorting over time from at least a quant backtest perspective doesn't work on the broader market or asset classes, largely because you can be right about being bearish, but wrong on exactly when it happens, right? And that's why it tends to be a losing game over time. How do you manage risk? I know time management is a part of risk management. I get that, but I'm going to assume that you've had a couple of short trades that you shorted it and then it just blows out suddenly and goes even higher, right, throughout the day.
Yeah, definitely. Risk management is extremely important to me because of what you said. And yes, I have blown out, but this was as I was learning, like back in 2017. So that was probably the first and last major big blow up I had because I really didn't understand risk management at all. Following that, I think I made a lot of really good positive changes that kept me out of trouble. So essentially, like the amount of risk I'm willing to put on trade is just the equivalent of some percentage of my account. And I use the R kind of mentality. So that's like Van Tharp, if you're familiar. And essentially treating each trade as like, hey, here's my stop, here's where I enter, and my position size is the difference to the risk per share and my dollar risk divided by the risk per share. That's my position sizing. It's usually not going to be an aggressive percentage. So like 1 or 2% for me, I think is pretty good and never really more than 4%. In doing so, I basically map out my risk of ruin. And so let's say if you risk 1% per trade, then you should have about 100 theoretical losses in a row, like with that position size. So it'd have to go 100 times against me in order to do a full blow up there. Obviously, you don't want to go down 100. Even at 50%, you'd have to make 100% back, right? So but even then, that is extremely unlikely. So essentially with that in mind, you understand like in terms of R multiples, like probably the worst thing that's happened to me would be like a -10. And that was like an ultra rare scenario that happened 2 years ago, -10 times my risk. However, like on average, if I'm going to get slipped, it's usually 1 to 3 additional risk units, which is not something that's difficult to recover, basically because my average wins about 3 or 4 times my loser. So by capping your risk out at that 1R, consistently taking that average loss around that same level, effectively like anytime something outlier happens, your reward side is meant to take the reins there and make it recoverable. So typically, like I use a couple different tools. So the first one will be broker assisted max losses. So each and every single day, I'm doing a calculation based on my average statistics. So essentially, if I have an average win of, let's say 3 to 1, right? And my average loss is just 1R, then I want to lose no more than 3 times on one particular position. So that would be -3R. That's at the worst case. Like usually I put it around -2. So in that case, I typically never draw down more than I can possibly recover in the next trade. And by equalizing the risk in this fashion, even in outlier situations, it's always recoverable within a relatively good time frame. Either it's a day, or if it's an extreme scenario, it might take 2 or 3 days of winning. The other aspect of this that I really hone in on is treating trading like a business. So while I said your risk of ruin would be about 100 losses, and in fact, it's actually a lot more because you'd be compounding down. Let's say the following day, if you took a loss, you'd be taking 1% or 2 of that account as it's drawn down. So you'd be risking a lot less. That actually extends the runway a lot more, but 100 is a lot more easy to understand. But what I was getting at is I'm consistently wiring out of my accounts, not like, hey, I'm going to just wire out every single week because it's Friday, but more so in a very structured way, which I can get into if we want. But basically like over 90% of the profit that I've made in the markets over the past couple of years, I have put into the bank. And that has not really slowed my growth at all, but it has guaranteed that effectively my risk of ruin in terms of net worth has been separated from the market. So the account itself is its own entity. And in fact, like when you scale it across my net worth in general, the risk of ruin actually goes down almost to I don't want to say impossible, but mathematically speaking, you're nowhere close because you're not even risking a percentage of your net worth. It would be something like very small, 0.02%, 0.1%, things like that. And so because of this, able to stay in the game as long as you're able to maintain your performance at a high level. And so that's my goal, is just the longevity and being able to keep executing on edge, taking profits out and not risking more net worth than I need to.
I think the temptation, though, would be if you're going through a drawdown, despite that sort of withdrawal process, you're going to want to then replenish, right? So you contribute instead of withdraw. How do you balance it out? Because I got to assume there are times when you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm going through a rough patch here, a rough streak. I need more capital to play with to come out of it.
I made a pact a long time ago that I will never replenish. I'll never wire back in. The way I treat it is like, okay, well, if I'm going to pull money out of this, treating it like a business, then I'm just going to pull out less money because look, if I was a better trader, then I wouldn't necessarily be in the situation, or perhaps there's a lesson to learn here. I cherish them in hindsight, not as I'm living through the experience, but essentially like every single time that I've drawn down in the past and have had to use lesser size and compound it back, those have been very impactful in terms of learning lessons or bringing in new systems to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. And those kind of improvements are only prompted by the feeling that your back's against the wall. And because I refuse to put any money back in, then basically just living and dying by the account. And I assume that, look, I'm just going to work my way out of this because in terms of the compounding process, if you get the ball rolling, it's not really going to take you very long to recover. It's just a matter of like, can you maintain a high level of consistency and performance and really focus on the process rather than try to make a little bit more. Like in my experience, this has pretty much shattered like all the goals I've set for myself by being able to withstand those moments. And sometimes the market is basically telling you something. It might be saying, look, your strategy is not working at the moment, or you may be caught in the wrong cycle of things, or your process is not as tight as it should be. And so when you go into drawdowns, you basically should be listening for those signs and starting to think about ways to fight out of that and work your way out of that, work through those problems rather than basically cheating your way back to normal. So for me, like once it's out of the account, it's going somewhere else, whether it's going to invest in some kind of fund or some different property or set aside for expenses, et cetera. Like this is not, I'm treating trading as a business. It's not something that I'm going to just consistently replenish and bail myself out. And on the retail side, especially if you get in the mindset that someone can bail you out, which no one will bail you out, then you have no idea what it takes to trade retail because you eat what you kill and you absolutely have to understand like what it takes to survive. And it's really not about the money. Essentially, like if you have a good process, the money will follow. And I don't really have to worry about it necessarily. So like I am willing to sit in whatever drawdown I'm in for as long as it takes until I get the skills to get out of that because my goals are a little bit higher than making a little bit of money today. I want to make a lot more money in the future and I want to be consistent.
I got to assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I got to assume that you do play occasionally longs. You're just not doing shorting.
Well, there's a massive opportunity to be long in the small cap space. But again, like in terms of performance, I feel like my longs are not as good, mainly because where I would be taking the short and being interested in the short is where if I flipped my bias is the worst time to be long. Like you wouldn't want to necessarily long every single breakout, right? Because if you're long at the tops, you're probably going to be the short-term top at the very least and have a really hard time with the risk reward component. So in terms of like anticipating the short, that is a little bit more tricky just because you have no idea basically how far the momentum can carry you that day. And so in terms of longing, that's a whole nother dimension that I would love to learn and plan on learning. However, like, again, like I don't want to swim upstream. The small cap market is basically primarily short-sighted for a reason. The edge exists there and you can essentially verify that through statistics if that's the way your mind thinks. But on average, somewhere between 3 out of 4 stocks are going to end red on the day. So if you're consistently looking for that long, you're going to have a lot of heartache. So I would say that it's semi-cyclical. Like you're going to have to rely a lot on different momentum cycles. You're going to rely on hype, and you're also going to know how to pick your spots in something that's extremely volatile. But the risk reward is there. So when you do win, you can even have a worse win rate than I do. Like you could even have like 10, 15, 20% because the upside is very big.
Do you think it takes a certain kind of mentality or maybe personality to be a successful short trader? I think a lot of people would think naturally that if you're predisposed to shorting, maybe you're just naturally more negative. May not be true, right? But I am curious how you think about how one's personality traits makes them more likely to want to short.
I honestly think no one comes into trading with the right mindset and right attitude about things or the psychological makeup. I think you have to mold yourself around what works. Like if you identify an edge, the edge is not going to change itself because of your personality. I think you can change yourself to accept the edge. So when I started, and what a lot of people do when they start or introduce this niche, is they say, okay, I'm going to take the long side because first of all, I don't have to find locate inventory like you mentioned. It's a little bit simpler to understand. And that longing is just something that we all know how to do. But when you actually really understand and dig into this and get your ass kicked a couple of times through the price action, how difficult it is to trade in terms of volatility, then you start to recognize like, hey, there is that overarching bias. Maybe I am fighting against gravity. And for that reason, like even from practicing and trying to go on the long side initially, I recognize like, look, I need to actually there are traders here who are role models who have done it successfully on the short side for the most part. And there has to be a reason for this. So in identifying that, like changing the way that I approach trading was more beneficial to me than just forcing myself to long over and over again when like that bias exists. So I think that you 100% can. I don't even know if it's personality thing. I think it's just the way I see it is just pure objective. There is a not right way, but like there's a extremely efficient way to trade these. So I would rather be on that side than getting frustrated for no reason.
So about how you went about finding your style and your approach. It's not like you retired from the esports side and said, you know what, I'm going to be this really good short seller. Presumably you had to figure out what your approach would be. Talk about that journey and maybe some of the things that you
been a long road to follow. Jeez. Been a long road to follow.
16 years old. It was before I did drugs or partying or anything like that. I was always raised in the church.
Me too.
My dad was a pastor. But and that's what makes it so crazy is when I was 16, it was about Halloween time.
Uh-huh.
And I was watching those shows on like the most haunted places, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I heard a voice when I went to commercial break. This voice came to me, and I was like, it was like they were talking about demonic spirits in this house or whatever.
Mhm.
And this voice, clear as day, said, "There's one in your closet."
Wow.
And I turned around and I'm like, started freaking out, and all of a sudden I realized subconsciously, I never thought about this, but as long as we lived in the house,
Uh-huh.
I never once had both doors to my closet open. I would, since I was a kid, I would
Do
always one
yeah,
door open.
and then one. Yeah, one door.
And it hit me, and there is a demonic spirit living in the closet. in my
Looked at to self-educate.
Sure.
And
So
I
obviously
told
the
my
first
mom,
thing you
I
do
said,
when you
"Mom, like, this
try to
sounds
get into
crazy. There's a
trading
demon in my room."
somewhat seriously is you're going to
You just
hop on
say,
YouTube or Google and you're going to search how to make money trading, right?
Uh-huh.
And the first thing that popped up for
She
me
would be
is
good.
someone
and so there's
who is
actually,
probably
like,
6
you know, like when you
degrees
cast out demonic spirits,
away
like,
from
you
each
know,
individual is like
open up
a person named Tim
door.
Sykes, and he basically
Yeah,
ran like
you need to- yeah,
viral
publish
marketing
it.
campaigns and put a lot of
But I
sponsor
didn't know
posts
that.
in and like
so
huge YouTube videos,
we
things like
were
that.
like,
And
walking in
I
my
was
room,
just immediately
and around the corner, I
sucked
stared.
into the small cap world, not because
Both doors were shut.
it's what I wanted to do, but essentially it's what I kept seeing repeatedly. And I kept seeing like, hey, this guy's doing it, this guy's doing it,
And I opened up
and they're
those
sharing how they're
doors,
doing it. So in that way,
so, like, breathing out
it
my
dragged
nose,
me
in
in.
the name of Jesus Christ,
I
I'm with you.
practiced
And
it. I
I
tried to trade it as seriously as possible on a
describe
paper
it,
trade side
it was
so that I could bring it after a year into the market and essentially
wow.
recognize, like, because I was practicing long, that
Passed through me.
I had to scrap all of it
I felt like
once
passed through me,
maybe
and the
a month or
window
two went by
beside
and
me
like
that
it was not
closed
going to plan. Because of course there's a
top corner
big difference between paper trading and live trading. And just through pure stubbornness, whether I landed on, let's say, futures or options or whatever, the fact that like there was a challenge made it so that I wanted to overcome it. And so I was not willing to leave the space that I got my ass kicked, basically. So I attuned myself to the small cap world. And I learned like through this process, like, hey, there's these people who are doing this, these people are doing this. You start connecting, networking on social media, start figuring out like who do you want to aspire to be and try to mimic them as much as possible. That way I was able to combine like different tools that I was learning and eventually come to my own philosophy about trading. But that was definitely, what was definitely pivotal in this was finding some Twitter accounts, like the one I have to shout out no matter what is called at Team 3D Stocks. He is like the godfather. Many successful traders, like even traders who have gone to make 9 figures, like he literally spawned a village of traders who are amazing. And I think that just literally finding 1 or 2 people that you can just straight up study them like a textbook, start to finish, go back 2014 tweets, read every single one of them. Like that was more invaluable to my education than, let's say, watching YouTube videos or podcasts or being spreading your knowledge base amongst like several dozen accounts. Like, it was really just those high quality, very cool feeds that you stumble across here and there makes all the difference.
I think one of the interesting aspects of trading, of course, is you get that dopamine hit, right? When you put an order through and it starts to work right away. Do you find that trading has similar elements of excitement like what you were doing on the esports side? Obviously, you're not doing it 24/7 unless you're doing cryptocurrencies, maybe, but maybe just talk about some of the sort of similarities and differences in terms of what you feel trading versus what you felt when you were doing the professional gaming.
Oh, 100%. You definitely get the same feelings. You get the same kind of rush. However, like obviously in gaming, well, not obviously, but it was a team game. And so you have this camaraderie aspect that's missing in trading it on your own. But like in terms of feeling this freedom in your day-to-day life, in terms of like, I can be at home, I can work here on my computer, and I can do something that basically has an unlimited ceiling in terms of potential. Like that is extremely motivating. It's a very competitive feeling. Like you want to, whether or not most traders recognize this or or willing to admit it, like definitely brought an ego into trading and wanted to prove myself and validate like, okay, well, when I was playing on a team, it's very difficult because one person can sink the ship. But in terms of trading, you're your own team. So if you feel like you're a highly capable individual, you demonstrated like you understand how to think strategically, then all of the dopamine, in my opinion, and I've definitely tried to shave it off. Like I'm not emotionally reactive as much to the trading in general because I don't want to be affected by that. So I've done work towards this. However, like I understand that's a lot of dopamine. But like the main pleasure or like dopamine component to this is like executing a strategy. So when you can put like an idea into a system and see that work and consistently work and be successful at this, like that's an intellectual stimulation that I really enjoy. And the second thing is that I personally don't set like goals necessarily. Like I wouldn't be like, oh, I want to make $10 million. I'd be more like, what are the things I need to do every single day to make $10 million? So it's going back to Atomic Habits by James Clear, really focusing on like the process of making money rather than like just making money itself. And so by focusing on just those little improvements day by day and also backtesting strategies, putting them live and seeing them shine or just making corrections, like to me, that's really where the most enjoyment came from. And I did mention like in the gaming world, I was in charge of strategy. So for me also in the same respect, like I really loved being able to like design something that was going to be successful and seeing it play out the way that I planned. So that's what I really enjoy about trading in general.
I'm curious, have you ever thought about venturing further and maybe either doing a hedge fund or some other kind of vehicle to manage other people's money?
Well, I personally feel like as an individual, I would get to the point where essentially like there's no difference whether you have at some point or make a couple $1 million. It's not really going to make that big of a difference in terms of the way that you perceived life. I don't want to necessarily assume more responsibilities. So for some people, that's their thing. But in terms of myself, like I want to be trading 9-figure level. So at that point, like I really don't see a benefit to managing other people's money besides adding more additional stress. Because the thing is, like, as someone, but like I have achieved like really high rankings in the game I play, and I recognize like the tool of success is that you're sacrificing something. So when I see people win championships, I don't think like the first thing I think of like, what did you sacrifice to get there? Did you sacrifice relationships, health, whatever it would be? Obviously, like I have a physical reminder in my hand. So yeah, assuming more responsibility for me is not really part of the plan. I definitely want to just be able to like, I think the process of becoming a high level trader inherently makes your life a little less stressful in the sense that like most 9-figure traders that I know personally are taking trades very seldomly. Like it's all about patience and finding the right opportunities rather than like scrambling day to day. I got to trade. Like, I think in pursuing this path, I'll be able to live a better life in general. So like buying back my time is the goal, and I don't want to assimilate more stress.
Not to get too deep into it, but it sounds like obviously that was a very difficult moment for you, right? When you had the injury, you identified yourself as this top performing esports player. It takes a certain amount of grit to say, you know what, okay, I may not be able to do what I used to do at a high level, but I'm going to apply my hunger to other domains and be successful in other ways. Maybe just talk about that sort of transition for you mentally, right? To go through the injury to then think about, well, what are you going to do now?
Yeah, well, that was one thing. There were several factors that went into it. Definitely recognizing like through the injury, like, hey, I can't practice as much as I want to. I'm probably not going to be able to perform at the level that I need to be. That was one thing that I definitely recognized. But in terms of the game itself, the average age of professional esports athlete is around 18 years old. So the emotional maturity side is not there. When I started, we were pretty much I don't know what to call it, we were setting the pace. Like we were the ones at the very beginning, and the prize pools back then was like playing for pizza, playing for like a couple $100. Like it was nothing serious. So as I started to mature into the esports scene, and as it was starting to bloom, like the opportunities were not really necessarily there. Like there was no like 40 million prize pool for me to compete for. So in that respect, like only the top 1% of 1% will make a living. But even if you're literally like the top 50 player in the world, you're not guaranteed to be able to make a living. You have to be literally the top 5. So in that regard, like, and with the emotional maturity of your teammates, it's extremely easy to get derailed and frustrated by just like these random arguments, these random like infighting, or just people not putting as much effort. So we oftentimes do these things called boot camps where you would move into a house for a couple months, sometimes a month at minimum, and like literally just train all day long with your teammates. And there's plenty of times where like for big tournaments, talking like $30 million tournament we're trying to qualify for, that after all the practice sessions, we're going 10 hours of practice. Then as the leader, I'm responsible for the strategy. I'm plugging into Excel, like I'm really gathering the data on the opponents, trying to figure out the plans for tomorrow. And what is my teammates doing? My teammates are watching anime on the TV. So like you have these kind of situations, you have situations where players like literally shut down, throw tantrums, or like just refuse to cooperate. And these can happen in like really high pressure situations. So more than one occasion, I've just not been able to like really perform as a unit because of these individuals. And obviously as a leader, I will take responsibility for anything and everything that happens. But like at some point you have to recognize like this is what it is. So that frustration has been boiling for a little bit. And not only this, but the United States in terms of representation in esports at the time, we were the worst region by far. Like you would not expect a United States team to even place like in the top 12. That was not really realistic. It was more of the place last. So the talent pool that you could select from was not also there. So what I had to do was I had to convince people to play with no salary, to wake up 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning to compete against Europeans in a game that's extremely competitive and fast-paced with a 2-second delay on every action you make. And when each game takes an hour and you're delayed out of your mind, it does make you a better player, sure, but like the amount of sacrifice you have to make in order to succeed at something like this was really intense. So like just from a pure lifestyle and stress aspect of it, like it was not that difficult of a choice for me to be like, hey, look, I am putting so much into this, it's not really panning out the way that I want. Like I really felt like at some point I was wanting to be top 3 in the world, basically. But I got as far as 7th, which is okay. But everyone plays to win championship. They don't play to get second place. Like no one cares about second place. So essentially, like with that in mind, the frustration boils up. I decided like there's no lateral movement for me in esports. Like at best you can become like manager, team owner, co-caster, content creator, right? But I wanted something a little more potential, and trading's kind of been my exit plan from the beginning. Like once I make enough money in gaming, like you're gonna have to retire somewhere around 30. And so I figured by that point I would have some money from gaming to invest and would take that to the next level. So it just happened a bit sooner than I wanted. But that decision was already laid out like long in advance. So it was easy to accept. It was just a matter of how do I start something different, and recognizing like, look, I already did something where the statistics of being a competitive gamer at the world stage is about as good, like it's probably worse than being a successful trader, to be honest. So I figured like it's possible to do this if you can apply the same kind of strategies, systems, mindsets, and I think it was. So
Brian, for those who want to track more of your thoughts, your work, your research, where would you point them to?
I would all just go to Twitter or X at Brian Lee Trades. There I have a pin post where I try to put all of the need to know things there, but there's so much. Like I built this feed to have a lot of gold nuggets, but there's a starter pack there with like all free contents, interviews, blogs, detailing this journey in more detail, and my risk management philosophy, everything. So if you go there, you got to find everything you need.
Everybody, please make sure you follow Brian. Again, I will add this as an edited podcast. It's probably in a couple of days here. And hopefully I'll see you all later in the week. I've got John Malden coming up tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Brian, real pleasure meeting with you, and I appreciate your time here.
All right, thanks for having me, Michael.
Cheers, everybody.
And all of a sudden, this fucking intense breeze came and blew through the fucking office. This just happened months ago. Just blew through there. The curtains were like blowing outside. And, but I told her, I said, when I walked in there though, I said, all she did was get rid of the 1 or 2 that was in the room. That center there, I'm sure there was Native Americans that were in that same area too. It's a portal there, an end. there's a big, big demonic spirit there, and they all congregate there. They, you know, people think that demons just run around willy nilly, and it's not true.
No,
They are an army,
Yeah.
and armies have generals, lieutenants.
They have an army.
Yeah. And so they have to go back to communicate what's going on and everything. And there's one of them right there in fucking Menifee. And it's a trip. And these are things that I've felt ever since that had happened and stuff. And
They have all this stuff down to a science, the government. They have like divisions that, like they were watching me for the longest time. Like and like they'd have like military guys would come up to me at certain points. They'd be like, you know.
the CIA still does that.
Yeah, like they were like, but this, like, you know, this guy was telling me things about myself that no one could have known. Like they were like, oh, you know, you walk this shoes, you know, this legs,
I met
you
person
walk with
like
it,
that.
you know, and then they were like, oh, and and you can do, this is who you are, and we have file on you, and this is what we're going to use you for in the future, and like they were like, at first like they told me that they were going to use me to like I put up shields if we were getting hit with like I don't ever think I could ever stop anything physical, but they said I would be able to stop like
Mental attack, spiritual attacks that
I,
they use.
well, that, yeah, like that I get that now because and that I have been doing like yeah, like I was learning about this guy and he had a terracotta army, and it was this army made out of pottery, and that created more fear and energy that like that defeated some people's armies, and they didn't even have to send out their real army, like.
And as long as that stood there, then
Yeah.
somebody has to take it down. Otherwise, they'll continue to do that. Then they feed that negativity, and that's the thing, is it still comes back to the demonism, demonic. My brain's whatever, but it comes back to that because it's using evil to curse people with more evil, and that's where the CIA used that. In Russia, there was these twins, and they tested this out. They could hear people's phone calls without having a phone by him, and one of them had the ability to physically harm people.
Yeah.
And they had her watching a TV, and there was a politician that they wanted to get rid of or something,
And she did
and
it.
she choked him out. All of a sudden, he's up there doing his shit, and he's just going like this, and they're thinking he's choking. But the documents were later leaked and released, and how much Russia was spending money,
And psychic soldiers.
psychic
To
soldiers,
build
to
a psychic
destroy
army.
America.
Yeah, like
and,
the other countries, they're so far ahead of us, and it's so stupid. Like even though like you know they from the early days of them doing LSD experiments and all that kind of stuff, like they've come so far, and they've never stopped. Like they say that the experiment stopped, but
we actually have control of more than a lot of the other countries, but the spirits are leaving.
we're fighting each other more than we're fighting that other. I'm like,
And this comes back to the aliens.
yeah, it's like what I'm trying to tell everyone is like, I'm like, pump the brakes. Like we haven't even fought any of the psychics from the other countries yet, even though they're already you know getting ready
Constantly
to
fighting each
infiltrate
other.
us. Like I'm like we're fighting each other more. I'm like I fought more American psychics because they don't like me for some reason, or they don't want me to be right or whatever. And like I'm doing mental battles with them, and they're using their powers on me and stuff. And this is stuff that you wouldn't survive. A normal person wouldn't survive this stuff.
And they would. That's why they're not being forced to live on military bases. The psychics, the people that have the mental capabilities to actually change how governments and people's minds work, they make them live on bases, on military bases. They're not allowed to leave because they're that fucking powerful. And this is known stuff. This is from released CIA documents that you can actually look up because of the Freedom of Information Act.
That's the whole thing. It's like now, like I was looking for this stuff, like in the beginning when I kind of already knew, and then I couldn't find anything, and then now it's like they're just giving it all to me because like I have to know it because it's
blocking
gonna
it.
have to come down. Yeah, like they already have the information. I'm like, how come I didn't find this when when I was like looking for this 10 years ago, like, and
It's because they chose not to release it to you.
yeah, they like they
How
thought,
did you get? How were you doing your research? What were you doing it
on
on?
the internet and stuff, right?
Exactly, on your phone, right?
It's like they could have just pushed it to me somehow, like.
You know what Black Mirror is, or what Black Mirrors are, of course,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You could look into it and see the future and things and like that.
It's
You carry one with
the
you
thing-
every day.
The thing is like those angels, like it's because my mom, she didn't want to have me, and so like when I was like super young, she was trying to lose me, and so she would leave me in grocery stores and stuff, right? And I find my way home every single time. It's because the angels were leading me.
Yes. I 100% believe that.
Are you leaving? Or?
No,
Oh.
I need to smoke a cigarette
Yeah,
though.
sorry.
Sorry.
No,
I'm a scumbag.
No.
I get the tea.
Like, yeah, like I want to do this more, but I'm like,
I like talking to
it's profound meeting someone like you because, like,
I feel that we were definitely meant to talk tonight.
yeah, like, people don't understand, like, that's my whole thing when I meet people. For my whole life, I would get into these Japanese comics, and those like the girl was going through exactly what I was going through, or what I would be going through. And it's like now that I know all of this stuff, it's like those weren't just comics that they just made.
There was
They
somebody
made
that
that.
they were told to in their brains.
Yeah, they knew I was coming, and they yeah, so that's right.
Go for it. So what you saw, that congressional hearing about UFOs, and the Senate also may release this information that, yeah, I know that we do have these documented incidences, has been programmed. This, it is a setup, it's a story that they fed to us. And the reason I know this is because, during World War II, Hitler had his head scientist was Werner von Braun. He developed the Victory missiles and the V-2 missiles that bombed London from Germany. He developed guided missiles without computers. Think about that. That's fucking insane. And Hitler had, you can look it up later, look at pictures of Hitler's UFO. There's a video of him walking around, and there is a round spaceship behind him that they had built, the Nazi scientists had built. When World War II was ending in Germany, Werner von Braun took him and his lead scientist and surrendered to America because he knew the Russians would kill them. The thing is those people were heavily involved in the occult.
Yeah, he had these 12 women. And they were providing information for him. That's how he was finding all these things.
Yes, they used to have sex on top in the graveyards so that the souls of their ancient warriors would be absorbed into their children, and these were things that they did. Werner von Braun was a Waffen SS general. They were the ones that believed in the superior race that did all the occult stuff. So when they surrendered to America, because the knowledge that he had of the rockets, they allowed them to assimilate into America. And in Russia, they started developing their rocket program. And Werner von Braun was one of the smartest men alive at the time. He's here in America, and he's just sitting around twiddling his thumbs. And our government realized, hey, Russia is developing the ability to go to outer space. They were the first to send a person to outer space. And so they came in Warner Ron, and so him alone outsmarted every scientist on the Earth. He was able to build the spaceship and guide it with people around the Earth to the moon without the computers that we have today. They had basic binary. And so the Minuteman missiles that we have, those things are like 60 feet tall. There's a six-story building is how big these missiles are, that at any minute they can be launched from here, fly all the way halfway around the world and drop off a nuclear bomb, and there's no computer in it.
Wow.
That's how smart he was. On his deathbed, so this is what this leads into. On his deathbed, and this is documented, they asked him, what would you like to tell us? He said, they said, how did you develop the missiles and the stuff you knew? He said, I had help. But he's the one that developed it. And then he said, our governments have alien technology. From before the aliens, they died. We were able to take it though, and we've figured out how to use it. We know how to use it. And our government is going to use the alien technology and create a war. It's going to look as if these aliens, all of a sudden that they've been denying, are going to come to Earth and they're going to attack us. They're going to create a war, and everyone's going to give up all their rights and everything. And we're attacking. We're going to get these aliens, but actually the aliens are our own people, our own government that have the alien technology. This is from the guy who developed all of our nuclear rockets and everything that we use today. This came from him. This isn't so someone just said that. That's what the guy that knows.
It's not just you.
Who had access to the alien technology.
What sucks about that also
because he was
I gotta show you this. Like,
it's a trick, and that's why when you said that,
Well,
you're I can see you're missing something. This is like all related.
yeah, like because I have this gift of discernment. Like I can see the truth in anything, and so my friends have been sending me these. I'll be watching a music video, and it's like I'm like seeing things that I'm like that. It's like, but the thing is like,
There's so much demonology in music videos and in Hollywood.
But like
that they're trying to make people immune to, but
I shouldn't be able.
So satanic.
That stuff I'm not so worried about. Like, it's the alien thing though. Like, it gets me because
all the information
like,
to say it's.
I think that, like,
Well, I just want to say that.
I think like dolphins. I think they did come from space.
I
Like,
just want to say that I loved all
like
the information.
from a young
you had
age.
to,
Like,
They can communicate to each other mentally.
yeah, like I've always been interested. Like, people will take like have me meet a dolphin for some reason. I'll be like, oh, a dolphin. And it's like, but it's been happening for so many years. It's like, okay, what is this really? I've been, I'm like, okay, what's really happening? It's like they're trying to keep.
You're probably able to pick up their communications.
They're not what I'm worried about. Like, but I just noticed that, too. It's like some of these species of animals that I think they're just animals. They're probably
All animals.
just be a talk.
Like
and
evolution
we
is a
probably
joke.
communicated with them.
Evolution has been broken apart. It's not.
We've
real.
become separate. Yeah, we've become like we were used to be so close to this stuff that we were like, oh, you're a people, you're a people. This guy, he was living with these bears, and they for so long, and it's just been impossible. But
And wolves and animals, they were able to control them, and that's because I believe in pretty much de-evolution. Humans are de-evolving because we're becoming more and more dependent on technology
Yeah, like-
and not using our brain. If the power went out, look at how many people would freak out and kill themselves and die over stupid shit. For just 100 years ago, anyone could live out in the woods.
Y2K, it scared like everyone. Like, but it's something that it's a real threat. Like, if a fire cell, like if we really lost like electricity, like we would go into a cold.
How much food storage do you have here in your house?
Like none, because it's like.
So I tell you the same thing I tell my friends. This is the problem. You know something's gonna happen.
Hey, have you heard of Claire Prophet? Like, her name's the same as Claire,
Mm.
Elon's wife.
Mm.
My name's Claire, but I watched one of her things. She
Since you're pretty balanced.
had a premonition about the bomb shelters.
looks good.
Like, she was the one who got she was like, hey,
This is a holy number.
they're going to shoot us
But
a lot, so
for
we need to have these
numerology,
things
you
called
got
bomb
the
shelters,
one.
and this is how to build them. This is what they.
So
She got that all
I
started.
would
Without her,
say
like we
that,
wouldn't
yeah,
have
just
bomb
focus on
shelters.
yourself.
And so I had
Da
one.
Vinci actually talked about a lot of that too. Da Vinci predicted almost to the day the very first nuclear bomb.
Wow, yeah, and like it's like
It's crazy.
so, what more than that where did I put these images?
But see, these people, these prophets, they're all having. If people keep forgetting that she had this image of the future of horror,
It might
of
be
terror,
ultimately
of meeting a bomb
a
shelter.
good card.
Da Vinci knew that too in the past too. They all see
And this is
the
creative
destruction
energy.
of the earth.
And this is I'm sorry,
And
this is
that's
financial. This is your financial.
COVID was a test.
Like
Yeah, COVID was dumb because
a social experiment.
yeah, it was yeah, right, like I'm like COVID, yeah, like it's like I couldn't believe, but something about like
People went insane. People
they
went insane.
they did a test where they wanted to see if people could get sick from just by seeing other people that they thought were sick, and by seeing someone that you think is sick, it would make them sick, and there was nothing even wrong with the other person. They just wanted to see it was a
They
psychological test.
manifested it into
Yeah,
themselves.
they manifest, and so it's like
And so like masks, like this is the whole science. There's so much science that everything that happened during COVID is the last thing you should do. The mask thing is a fucking joke because the particle size of a virus is so small.
I'm like,
it will go through that.
I'm like, yeah, like this thing is outlasting the windshield on our car. Like,
No, it dies within 7 minutes of being in the sun, which goes to show you.
that's what I'm like, we're
CNN to that. COVID was man-made.
yeah, this little girl took it apart. I'm like, it's made of like coils and cogs and it's destroying the human race. I'm like, I can't believe it. And then
It's a social experiment
they wanted-
because they want. What's going to happen is
those
World Health
those
Organization.
vaccinations, I didn't want to get that
Don't get it. Don't
vaccination.
ever get any of that
I mean, I
shit.
had to get one because like,
don't get them. Don't get any more of them.
yeah, right. 'Cause
Lucky
that
to be
first one I
alive.
took, I think it was, I felt like it was gonna kill me.
And they're not telling people what's in them. And
Yeah, 'cause
it's fucked up.
yeah, like
They have
like this,
commercials for kids having heart attacks. Now, if your child has a heart attack, that never was a fucking thing before COVID and the
They're great.
vaccination.
I'm working with scientists because we're supposed to be in an evolutionary we're supposed to be making an evolutionary jump right now, but our DNA is supposed to be moving into a crystalline DNA, but our bone structure is calcium, like, and so I think that's what it's really going to do. It's going to help us to.
Our DNA prevents evolution.
I mean,
When you look at a genetic cell, okay, right, and you look at the theory of evolution, the theory of evolution is literally based off of something out of nothing. That's impossible. You can't have something out of nothing.
that's where the miracle takes place.
The human DNA code in our blood structure is so long that if you were to write it out, it could go all the way from the sun back to Earth. That's how long the human DNA genetic code is. It's a code. That's a written code. It was made. You can't evolve something out of nothing. And so the thing is that they're doing now is they're taking the stem cell research. These scientists are trying. They want to destroy the human cell
No, it's
to
different.
control us.
Yeah.
It's not evolution. It's
Dasher, dancer, princess, vixen, comet, cupid, don't